Okay, guten Tag, Damen und Herren. This is Frank at Iron Age News, South Florida Conservative News Service. I've got the Hollywood filter on, which means the sun is out, and we're going to discuss a problem that the Germans have been having, and unfortunately may affect us rather soon. So we're going to cover this briefly as we can, but the major work has been done at the website www.southfloridaconservative.website. We have more analysis. We have all the behavioral stuff to some extent that we could get. And so we will talk about this now. It is Wednesday, January 7th, and it is cold as a well digger's ace in Berlin because there's been sabotage. So we're going to examine the emergence and escalation of a modern sabotage cell in Germany known as the Vulkangruppe. Yep. And what its actions reveal about how contemporary extremist groups actually form and operate. Those of you who are fans of terrorism or have looked into a lot or any of the formation of the modern morons that go around destroying property in the United States, the majority of it in the US goes from idiots of today back to the Weather Underground. The Weather Underground, of course, traces itself across the sea to the Red Army faction or the Bader Meinhof gang, depending on who you're talking to. So we're going to follow the trajectory in a similar way because it follows ideological to some extent with Red Army faction. They all sort of do. So because these aren't really what you think they are, and that's what we like to have you understand more every day. Okay. So, what a group like Vulcan Group and what its actions reveal about how these contemporary groups operate. So, we'll start with the first time we've heard of them, which you probably haven't because Germany tends to hide any kind of terrorist activity that's occurred, especially if they're afraid that Islamist militant factions have been involved. The Islamic movement in Germany has never killed anybody, has never burned down a church, has never attacked a girl, has never done any of that stuff. But some guys dressed like them do a lot of that shit. So the first time this group as an organization shows up is because of an arson attack on the Tesla Berlin car factory. They build battery. They were building batteries there and escalated into a wintertime attack, which is in the last couple of days on Berlin's power grid, leaving tens of thousands of homes without any type of electricity. And most of this part of the country revolves around electricity for heat. Figure it out. So we're going to take a clear shift from symbolic protest to coercive civil harm. We're going to explore why electrical vehicle infrastructure became a target, how climate rhetoric can function as a moral justification rather than a policy goal, and why modern extremist cells no longer need physical safe havens to evade detections. So we're going to draw on a historical comparison with the Red Army faction. And this episode explains how today's groups differ small or low tech network and able to retreat into an everyday normalcy rather than an exile. Some of these things, obviously, we'll have to discuss because we'll have to assume that you're not big fans of this. And if you are big fans of this, you probably are going to, try to blow up our cars and houses for discussing it. So give me 1 second because the thing just went dead on me. All right, there we go. So, as I said, for a more full academic analysis, go to the website www.southfloridaconservative.com and you'll find that in a more academic style, this will be more plain language for the rest of what I'm doing here. So, in 2024, an arson attack shut down operations at the Tesla Berlin car factory. The attackers framed it as an environmental and anti capitalist action. Then, around 20 months later, Another attack occurred, this time against the power infrastructure in Berlin, as I mentioned. The results were immediate. Tens of thousands of homes lost electricity. Hospitals and care facilities relied on emergency generators. Old people are freezing, basically. And this happens in January, which is not the best time to be old and without heat in Germany, especially Berlin. That second attack wasn't symbolic, it was caused to directly cause civilian suffering. And that change in target tells you a lot about what's going on. So let's talk about Tesla first. Okay, they were the first target. A lot of people said, why Tesla? Aren't electric vehicles supposed to help the environment? Everything Obama said, is that it's true, blah, blah, blah. So, from a policy perspective, yes, everything Obama told you. But extremist groups don't think in policy terms, they think in symbols. So to them, Tesla, as you know from everything you hear in the media, we can't say that one influenced the other. Tesla represents corporate power, green capitalism, meaning he's making a dollar, he's not doing it for free. Elite driven solutions, because anybody with a brain can't have a solution that has to go through a socialist cooperative so that they can add their 2 cents. So they see that as fake or corrupt or somehow screwing the working man, or actually the poor person. They never take the part of the working man. Tesla wasn't targeted because it was the worst polluter. Germany has any number of battery manufacturers in Germany. It was targeted because it was the most visible symbol. And lucky for BMW because they have a big battery plant too, right? So they were probably number one if Tesla hadn't been there. So this wasn't about emissions, it was about sending a message. That's the Tesla story. We're sending our message. It's our first outing as a group. Okay, so the real shift comes with the power grid attack. There's an important difference here. Attacking a factory sends a message, you know. Attacking the power grid is applying pressure on the government and the infrastructure and the people that live within the area of the power grid. Cutting the electricity doesn't just make a point, it forces ordinary people to feel vulnerable. Vulnerability equals fear, and you know how that story runs from there. Once a group is willing to do that and then justify it afterward, they're crossed a major psychological line. At that point, it's not accidental that there's suffering in there. The suffering is leverage for what they want to do, or I will beat your old people to death or freeze them. I am freezing your old people. I am freezing your children. I am doing these things in the name of whatever my goal is this week. I am not to be messed with, and I'm going to prove it, right? That's when your protest has given way to coercive logic, is the term. Look it up. I think you should. The group's actions say that they are self defense against fossil fuels. So the idea would be the batteries, that's supposed to help. The grid is already in existence. The grid has to use, in that area, I think they use coal fire or something like that. But they can't use solar because solar has been a failure in Germany. It's just not in the right place to have solar, and the wind doesn't work very well either. They shut down their nuclear power plants that had years of life in them yet, all in the name of greenness. And now these guys come along and cut off the last of it in Berlin and do all this damage because they're trying to have a self-defense against fossil fuels, as if fossil fuels has hired a hit squad to go into whatever tenement they're living in and kill them off. But you have to look at the rhetoric, right? We don't have copies of the communiques. You can look around and you'll hear various academics commenting on them. Nobody's getting to see them, unfortunately. Somebody will probably pop up with them. In Europe, they're probably available somehow. We don't have the ability to get them right now. But you have to look at the rhetoric. There are no clear policy demands. There are no emission targets. They're not saying, let's bring the carbon footprint down to whatever. There is no pathway to reform. They're not saying that we should burn gold bars or Donald Trump or anything like that, right? Instead, it's moral absolutism, it's class resentment, sorting the victims into deserving and undeserving, which you know you're in some serious shit when this starts to come about. And that tells us something very important. The climate language is not the goal, it's the justification. It's the false front that they're hiding behind. And it allows harm to be reframed as necessity because there are people in the world who are now conditioned to believe it's okay to kill people to save the environment. Greta Thunberg, an exact example of where these assholes would be preaching themselves to. Okay. So, who makes up a group like this? And this will be something we'll have to store this for when they finally do get caught, if they get caught, because every time Germans try to do an investigation these days, the higher ups sort of put the boots to it, unless it's chasing Nazis. If they could have proven that this was a far right group, they would everybody be out of their houses right now. But it's not. It's a socialist organization, so socialist neo, it's not even neo-Luddite. It's just bullshit, nihilist, communist propaganda bullshit. Okay. I'm not being scientific today. We did all our science shit yesterday when we put the report together. So one key insight from modern extremist research is that groups like this often form through convergence, not through planning. You say, how do you get people together to do something like this? You don't advertise in the what is it, the penny trader or whatever at the local store. I can't get this on Nextdoor or Tinder or whatever. So what they're finding, and this is a common pattern, just I'm not saying this is what's been going on here, but this shows signs of it because of what has occurred. There are certain key parts to this operation in both of these cases, which are incredibly detailed, disciplined, academic, things of that nature. But the delivery system for punishment is very, very primitive. Now, you could say, oh, they're doing it that way to try to throw off the German authorities because they have a lot of different whatever going on. Mm, I will say no to that. You can argue it. Fine, go ahead. You get your own website or whatever and do what you want to do. All right. Basically, you're going to find in a situation like this, because this has occurred in serial murder cases as well. One person is drawn to the destruction, the arson, the sabotage, the transgression, and another is drawn to the ideology, the moral framing and justification. So, on their own, each lacks an important component to get the job done. However, together, you've got violence with justification and ideology that can get proof that it works because we're out there setting these fires. The fires, especially on the second one, they knew exactly where the maximum damage could be done with the minimum amount of bang. There were no improvised explosives. It's basically fire and an accelerant, whatever it was. Germans aren't talking right now. Okay. So the other group forms after earlier unattributed attacks, we do not have information from the Germans on because it's not openly sourced. The Germans should be, since it seems to always want to attack Berlin. Granted, it's the capital, but it's not always the good thing with Berlin, I would say, because we were just talking about this for EDM and house music and everything, is there are very few Germans in Berlin as opposed to, oh, I don't know, Munich, any of the other states in the South. Germany has always had this thing in Berlin, even during the separation, because he had all the Russians, he had the Americans, he had the British, the French were theoretically there. So you had a cosmopolitan kind of feel going on in Berlin, especially when the wall came down, it became an artist colony. So you have a lot of people that the story, if it affects them, can send it home. You know what I mean? You're from wherever you're from, Turkey, you're from France or Holland, and you call your parents, say, I have to come home because some terrorist group just blew up the power grid. So the story is going to get out one way or another. It's going to affect people in a much larger area than Berlin. It's why you had the people attack the where they attacked them in Israel with the dance show there, the bombing that occurred in Atlanta, which nobody ever really got the true answer to what was going on there, the marathon in Boston, shit like that. So that's just some of it. There's a lot to it. I'm burning time. I'm sorry. So people are going to ask, like, well, where are these guys going between attacks? What are they doing? In the past, we have discovered groups because the reason I keep bringing up Red Army faction is in the actual communiques that they've released to uh, the uh, the German authorities or through the press, supposedly, they are very much in line with early Red Army faction. Before Red Army faction got sold out, got popular, got big, whatever you want to say. I like it's the first Sonic Youth record. Only thing I can tell you that I can't tell you anything else. So they have found out that over the years, the Red Army faction relied on physical safe havens, and a number of them were in East Germany. So they would blow some shit up and just walk across into East Germany. The East Germans knew who they were, the Stasi knew where they were, and they just let them hang out because they were doing God's work, right? And they tell me, because that's how things are these days, and nobody wants to spend the manpower, that's not how it works anymore. Modern cells don't retreat to places, they retreat into normal life. They're going more with the behavioral analysis thing that it's much like, I hate to say much like a serial killer or rapist, but they did the thing. Now they can sit back and bask in the afterglow. They don't need to go to Pago Pago. Okay. They can sit around the house and have a couple of yanks to it and everything's great until they have to get the band back together to do something else. Because as I said, they are not asking for anything. They aren't asking for $10 million dollars in a suitcase. They aren't asking for the president of Germany to step down. Okay. But the theory in Europe is that modern cells don't retreat to places, they go into normal life. So I'm going to follow that. And we followed that for this with us rolling our eyes. They go silent, they blend in, they wait. Their sanctuary isn't geography, theoretically, it's anonymity. But if someone is of these mindsets at some point, it's going to grieve them not to be able to spill the secret, isn't it? So we'll find out later on. But this story isn't just about one group in Germany, it's about how modern extremism is actually working. Low tech, small scale ideological absolutism, and it's hidden inside normal society. The key warning sign is simple. And we saw a lot of this go on during the riots, the Summer of Love riots, where if you noticed, the handlers for the operations of the mob were ratcheting up the level of violence every time. I had seen it from videotape I'd seen from a number of northeastern cities, where one minute they were doing the deal where they have the banner with that's being held together with the pole, and then they pull the poles out and they have PVC that has been cut to an angle for stabbing. They were using a lot of old timey, tricks that way. The frozen water bottles. I don't know if you remember the laser beam to the eye. All these kind of things, and we did videos on it. When you want to inculcate somebody into your style and into your level of violence, you don't just take them out, and some people do. You don't just take them out and give them a rifle and say, shoot that motherfucker. If you have people, especially in the West, that aren't familiar with violence, that works in the third world. If you have somebody who went to Swarthmore College and she's just like getting back at mom and dad by effing as many whatever minorities as she can, and then sending photographs to her parents to upset them, and then she gets in with the Patty Hearst squad, right? Symbionese Liberation Organization, then they'll start you out doing small things. And next thing you know, you're holding a submachine gun while they rob a bank. And you wonder how you got there. So, like I said, if you want to see more about this, and it's things that you should be able to look at in your own community, and it's not being paranoid if you say to somebody at your city or county meetings, if you're riding through your town, as I ride through my town, The major sewage pumping facility for my section is right down the street here, and there's no fence around it. It's in the ground, but there's no fence around it. So if I took the lids off of it and dumped something in there, a barrel of bang, and dropped it and blew it the F up, the sewer would flood all through this community here of however many thousand houses, and it would take forever to get it back on track because bomb damage, right? So there are a lot of little shit that you see. Electrical grid is in trouble everywhere. You see a place like that, you see an electrical transformer area where they step it down, and maybe it has a fence and maybe the fence isn't locked. Make the call right down. People are going to say you're a dick, right? But if the fence is unlocked and it's 10 o'clock at night, there's always a facility number on there somewhere and a phone number. Take a photograph or two, write it down, call it in, say, I'm concerned this thing is open. I'll send you a picture. Here's this, here's that. And you put it on something like next door because maybe they didn't know. Maybe it was setting something up for something you don't know. The more aware, I'm not saying being paranoid, the more aware you are of the physical limitations of your surroundings in this modern time, the better off you're going to be because the opposition, as it is starting to lose its grip on large hunks of real estate worldwide, is going to toughen up. They didn't think they were going to have to go to certain things as fast as they're going to have to. And then I guess they're figuring, well, we have X amount of thousands in the United States. If we lose a few, we'll still have enough hardcore to go out and do the damage. That's when you're going to have that problem. That's why this kind of a group is an issue because they are inherently, as a Western based organization and not influenced by Islam in any way that we can tell, they are what we would be up against here in the United States or a variation thereof. So that's about all. Check it out, www.southfloridaconservative.com for all the other information. Any questions, feel free to comment and send us whatever. All right. And talk to you later on. Goodbye.